Many have asked what the difference is between a quarantine and an isolation. That is a great question. A quarantine is when a person is asked to stay home and avoid others because they may have had exposure to an infectious agent. For COVID-19, the quarantine period is 14 days because that is the incubation period for the virus, meaning that at any time in 14 days, one can have enough of the viral load of COVID-19 to either become ill or to be an asymptomatic carrier and transmit to others. So it's important to observe a 14-day quarantine if there has been exposure to COVID-19. One is asked to quarantine themselves for 14 days if they have been a close contact to a person that has tested positive for COVID-19 or is symptomatic for COVID-19. By close contact, there are a couple scenarios that may apply. The first and most common would be that the person has been within 6 feet of the positive case for 15 minutes or more, and that 15 minutes can be cumulative over a 24-hour period. The other would be if you have lived with the person or provided care for them in their home and had been unable to have the positive case isolate themselves. This frequently happens when a parent is positive and they still have to care for their child, then the child would be quarantined, or a spouse would have to be quarantined. Another would be if you had direct physical contact with the positive case, meaning you touched them or hugged them. That would also require quarantine. And if you've shared drinking or eating utensils with them, or if you have been exposed to their respiratory droplets, such as by a sneeze or a cough. There may be other scenarios that could be determined to be a close contact, and they would be specific for each person, but in general, those are some of the scenarios you need to think about when you are informed that you have been a close contact or are asked if you've been a close contact and whether you need to quarantine or not. Isolation is when a person has been infected with an infectious agent and they are asked to stay home and avoid others so as not to spread that agent. For COVID-19, the isolation period is approximately 10 days. However, that is dependent on whether symptoms are improving and whether one is fever-free. A person is asked to isolate themselves under a couple of different scenarios. One would be if they're asymptomatic but have tested positive for COVID-19. The other is if they're symptomatic and they have not yet received testing. And the other is if they're symptomatic and have received a test and it is indeed positive.